2026 sees me travel the length and breadth of England to run a marathon per week in each of its 39 historic counties. Why? To raise funds for Tommy's, the charity that does incredible work to try to end the heartbreak of baby loss. I'll be joined each week by someone who has their own story of loss, their own rollercoaster journey, their own reason to be there. This podcast shares those stories in the hope that they can bring awareness to an often undiscussed topic and even, perhaps, a flicker of light in someone's darkness. You can follow the runs, the stories, and donate to the cause at marathonsformiracles.com. Enjoy. Hello, welcome to this week on Marathons for Miracles. We're flying along now into week 5 and very, very pleased to be joined this week by Lucie, who is going to be taking on our Staffordshire leg towards the end of January. Hello, Lucie.
Hello, Olly. Thank you very much for having me on.
Not at all. Thanks for being here. This is going to be a really interesting episode. We've got some fantastic perspectives from the loss side of things and that we'll get into with Lucie, and also some brilliant running stories and running side to it. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. So thanks again for joining us, Lucie. We'll get going in the usual fashion. Can you let us know what led you to be involved with Marathons for Miracles, and what are your motivations for wanting to join the cause?
Again, thanks for having me on, Olly. I'm really grateful to be able to be involved in your amazing journey. So going back to my story, I am 53 now, but when I was 24, I got pregnant with assisted conception. Me and my husband had really struggled to get pregnant. And so I finally fell pregnant with twins, and that was very joyous, but also quite daunting because I had a few complications at the start of the pregnancy. I blew up with loads of fluid around my sort of lower part of my lungs and had to have all that drained off. So there was a few bits and bobs, a few ups and downs, but generally things were going pretty well. And then I think it was just before 20 weeks, I started to have some pain and some bleeding. And so I sort of went with it for a little bit, and then we phoned the doctors, and consequently I was taken into hospital. And I spent I think it was about 3 days in hospital, desperately trying to convince everybody and myself that I was going to be able to hang on to these 2 lovely babies. But unfortunately, after 3 days, it was not to be. And my cervix had unfortunately dilated early, and I had to give birth to the twins myself, which was extremely traumatic. And I was away from home. I was in Bath at the time with my husband, and yeah, it was pretty awful having to sort of give birth to something you didn't want to let go of. So that was difficult. Of course it was horrendous. And so yeah, of course it was always a cause that was very close to my heart, and being a runner as well, I felt like it was really important for me to get involved in this cause.
The thing I would interject with very briefly is just to say sorry that you went through that. We end up saying this every week, and I often wonder if I can keep saying it with the same sincerity and gravity that it's intended with, but it's hearing stories like that they take you back to places that you've been, and they don't get any easier to hear. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing, and I'm sorry that was your outcome on that occasion.
Thank you for that. But I'm a long way down the road, and I'm very fortunate we were very fortunate that we have a son. So we're very lucky, but we'll never forget our twins. We actually named them Oliver and Harriet. So it's funny. I feel quite emotional talking about them, and quite often I don't these days, but this is made me a little bit emotional. So
I had a similar experience on one of the first podcasts that I did as a guest, having not, and it's much, I guess, more recent history for us, but I don't really struggle. I hadn't really struggled to talk about it previously, but it's quite rare, I think, that you say it out loud
Yeah.
from start to finish.
Yeah.
You might allude to having had a miscarriage or allude to having lost a baby, but I think the nature, and this is an important part of the conversation, I think the nature of society, of the society that we live in, is that you might allude to it, but then sort of move on quite quickly.
Yeah, very,
And
very much so. Yeah.
to actually start at the beginning and go through, even in a sort of a couple of minutes as you have there, is not something that we necessarily do very often. So
No,
yeah,
absolutely
very
not.
very
I think as well, one of the things that really motivated me was when we chatted, Ollie, about perhaps with a large age gap between us, the differences that perhaps you guys may have experienced things very differently to how me and my husband did at the time. I was, as I say, away from home, down in Bath. So I live in just on the Shropshire, Staffordshire border. And we were actually at my husband's work down in Wiltshire. So I think we went to, we were taken to Bath Hospital. And I was, even now, I was staggered by the harshness of some of the midwives, like just the brutality of the facts. And I know that you have to have the facts, and I know that you probably don't want to hear them, but some of that was very, very brutal and quite difficult to accept. Without going into really fine detail, when I actually was having to give birth to them, it was it was like a matron talking to me. I didn't want to do this thing that they were making me do, and actually my body had to do at the end of the day. But that was really traumatic, and I really, really hope that the education for the midwives that are dealing with these things these days has come on massively. I'm sure it has. I have absolutely no doubt that it has. But that was very, very difficult. And also the follow-up was really hard, because we wanted to bring babies back to Shropshire, and to try and get that process in place was very difficult. In fact, nearly impossible. And we were promised things like a photograph that never came. So it was little things that would have meant the world that sort of didn't happen. But that sounds very, I think that sounds very entitled. It's not meant to. It just would have meant a lot to have, it would have meant a lot to have the photo. Because I did go and see them, and I was offered that opportunity, and I'm really glad that I did. I wasn't sure I wanted to, but I did. I can kind of picture what I saw, but yeah, it would have been nice just to have that somewhere special.
Yeah.
So yeah, some of the practices were not ideal, put it that way. And I'm sure that work has been done that means that has changed significantly. And
I don't think it sounds entitled at all. I think this is one of the common things that comes up, is the fact that these are still babies. They're still humans. They're still your hopes and dreams. And to lose them at any stage is devastating. And for you to have that picture of Oliver and Harriet, my wife Amy spends half an hour every evening looking at photos of our daughter, and no one would question her for doing that. It's perfectly normal. So yeah, I don't think that's entitled in any sense. And I hope things have improved, and I think that they have. But we can certainly go into that a bit more. The first thing that came to mind when you were telling your story, you mentioned that you phoned the doctors to let them know what was going on. What did that look like? Because as you may know, Amy is currently 38 weeks pregnant. So all of this stuff is very, very familiar to me at the moment.
Yeah.
Has any doubts about movements, how she's feeling, anything whatsoever, she rings the triage line, she speaks to the midwife, and invariably they say, we think you're fine, but come in, we'll put you on the
Yeah.
monitor, we'll just check everything over, check your blood pressure, etc., and we'll be 100% sure that everything is okay before we say, yeah, go home. What did that look like at that time? Because obviously you'd had a few days where you hadn't been feeling great.
Yeah, but
Who did you call?
it happened away. So
Mhm.
we made a call to the doctors, and then we were just told to ring for an ambulance. So that part, and then I spent 3 days in hospital, basically
Mm.
in labour, I guess, early. So it was literally a pass from the doctor straight to the emergency services. However, that brings up a very important point. So post this miscarriage, and well, funnily enough, I don't necessarily refer to it as that because I gave birth to my babies, but
Yeah.
they weren't alive, so it was a miscarriage. But I think the important point here is after that, when I fell pregnant with Charlie, the tiniest thing, and I was massively paranoid, like ridiculously paranoid, as I'm sure that lots of people can relate to the tiniest thing. And I would be straight up to the doctors and quite often sent to the hospital, and I was given a swab or whatever. They were really good once I'd had the bad experience. So
Mm.
I was looked after exceptionally well after the first big problem. I guess as well, because there were some complications involved, they suspected I'd had a weakened cervix. So when I fell pregnant with Charlie, they actually stitched my cervix
They
so that
did.
they
Okay.
sort of held him in place.
Yeah.
So there was, I guess, opportunity because I was slightly perhaps at risk, that when I rang, I got that people responded quickly. So
Yeah.
to be fair, after the twins, yeah, I had great care.
I was going to ask about that stitch because that's one of obviously quite a big thing these days with preterm birth and preventing preterm birth is the cervical stitch. And I didn't know how. Now I'm of the impression that it's quite a common procedure. I didn't know if it was
I have
30 years.
never met anybody else. I've never talked to anybody else, but then again, perhaps that opens this whole thing up. We don't talk about it that much. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm talking about, 28 years ago. So I don't know. It seemed a little bit peculiar, but I was just like,
Mm.
yeah, do anything, do what
Sure.
you've got to do.
It's going to work. Yeah.
If it works, great. And they did that, and it seemed, well, it did work. It did work. So, yeah.
And you mentioned sort of your paranoia through that second pregnancy. And again, we've had 2 subsequent pregnancies. And so I'm very, very familiar with that feeling. Again, it's all quite present for Amy and I, but for you, it's happened a while ago now, but it's obviously still very front of mind. Are those feelings of worry and paranoia and constant sort of nervousness, they're obviously still very front of mind and very vivid for you?
Very, to the point that I have an only child, and there's a reason I never wanted to go through it again. I never wanted to go through that again. Not the giving birth or anything like that. I never wanted to go through the stress that I felt in the pregnancy with Charlie again. So, yeah,
Because it's a
it
long
did stay
time.
with me.
9 months is a long time to
Yeah.
feel.
It
like
is, and I made a conscious choice that that was it. I was done. So it
That's
definitely had a huge impact, but perhaps at the time I didn't realise the strength of that impact. But talking about it now, it makes me realise, that's a really big thing. Charlie does have a brother and sister, but not
Yeah,
Not
in a different way. Do you look back now, and it's going slightly off topic,
yeah,
but do,
no,
do
no.
you look back now and wish you'd found the strength to do that for another 9 months, or there's no, it's that, yeah. And I think we were talking to earlier on week 2, I think, with, we had Alex on, who's a student midwife, and she was talking about, a big part of their training is dealing with loss. And I was asking her a lot about dealing with loss as it happens, but she brought up, and it's very valid, dealing with pregnancies after loss. And I think you can have a very successful pregnancy, second or third, or wherever your miscarriage or your loss has fitted into your pregnancies. I've said this a few times, that there are 2 types of pregnancies. Ones that with people who haven't had a loss, and ones with people who have had a loss. And I think they are night and day.
Yeah.
And Alex, who I actually ran with, we ran their marathon yesterday, at the time we're recording this, and she was saying the experience of dealing with women or with couples who have had experienced a loss versus who haven't.
Yeah.
It's almost like it should be two different training courses. It's the things, the mindset is just so different.
Yeah.
And the things that cause concern, it's not even that they don't cause concern for people who haven't had loss. It's just that they don't even know that they might need to be concerned about those things. And I think that's, something that's often, well, I don't know if it's often forgotten, but it's something I find interesting.
Mm.
Something else you mentioned, which again is becoming a bit of a common theme, is, I think you used the word brutality of the
And I would stick with that word.
There is an extent to which medical practitioners need to be medical practitioners, and they need to tell you
Agreed.
how it is. Where do you think the line is, and where do you think a bit more humanity needs to come in? And looking back on your experience specifically, what was distinctly lacking that could have been there without clouding the medical side of things?
I'm trying not to, but it's a very vivid memory. I'm trying not to get too graphic. I think when I was being told that I had to push the babies out, and the point where I was shouted at that if I didn't, I'd be taken to theatre and it would have to be done for me, and I wouldn't have not that there was a choice, but you've got to do this or this. And it was mind-blowing, because everything inside me was like, push-pull is the wrong way to express what I'm trying to say, but effectively it was. I wanted to hang on to them, and this woman was telling me to get rid of them. I don't want to get rid of them.
Yeah.
I don't want them out of my body. They're meant to be inside me, So I was partly cross that had been approached in that way. I think it could have been I think it could have been done a little bit more kindly.
So it was the manner of the delivery.
Well, I think so. And I agree with you. At some point, there has to be come on, this has got to be done. So it was.
We did. Yeah, we did that with our miscarriage. It was 14 weeks, so Amy had to give birth. It wasn't, as you say, it's difficult to look at it as a miscarriage because, and if it's any encouragement or consolation, the lady that we had, Sarah, who I will never forget, was the most wonderful human being I've ever met in my entire life.
Well, I'm really pleased that you had that experience.
She essentially, not all of the time, but at times just sat on the floor in our room and just chatting and, just trying to humanize the situation as much as possible.
Yeah.
And then when things needed a medical eye, she was there. But I think by having brought that human side elsewhere, then she was then able to be firm and medical in her approach when she needed to be. And I guess if there's none of the former, the latter just feels so cold in a situation which is devastating.
I felt like people were just walking in, telling me what to do, then going.
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah, my experience wasn't too good that way. And I'm really pleased that things have, by the sounds of it, moved on and training and et cetera,
Yeah,
progressed.
yeah, and I hope so. And I guess the other thing that Alex said, which was interesting, was that they speak a lot about treating every single situation is a completely fresh slate. And you're walking into a room where a family might be coping with something really well. They might be coping with something terribly. And that's not so necessarily confined to loss. That can be successful deliveries as well.
Yeah.
And it's about just walking into that room and gauging, right, what's actually, I've seen the notes, so I know what's going on from that perspective, but what is going on in this room that I need to manage that situation
Yeah.
as much as, if not more than the situation that I've got on my
How are
notes.
these human beings?
Yeah,
How are they
exactly.
coping with this situation?
Yeah. And I guess that could be said for the health service as a whole,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Does it
absolutely.
isn't sorry to say I'm confined to obstetrics, but it's yeah. What was the setting? What was the setting like in the hospital? Were you
I
on a
was in a
delivery
room on
ward
my own. I remember the big
within sort of the
window.
delivery unit, or
Yes. Yeah.
yeah? Because again, I know that I hadn't noticed it, but Amy, with her woman's instinct, had noticed it as soon as we walked in there. We had a white feather on our door of our delivery suite on that day, and I think it's what we were just talking about. What's the mood in this room? And that is apparently an indicator that yes, there's a delivery happening, but it's not. We've since been back to the same delivery unit very happily to bring Poppy into the world.
Yeah.
It was a very separate. That was at one end, and everyone else was at the other end. And so you're not sort of
It was a a room on its own, if I'm honest. I don't remember much more than that. Big
fair enough.
window that looked outside on the car park. That's about it. Uh,
In terms of the follow up from your loss, was there any support available either through the hospital or charitably?
I think I found my own, and I remember using a charity called SANS,
Yeah,
I think, if I
yeah.
remember
SANS are
rightly.
still very, very much on the go. Yeah,
They were very helpful at the time. I found, because a few of my certainly I lived in a village at that point, and a few of my friends were having babies, and that was hard. That was really hard because they'd had their babies, and I was just I think I was quite angry to start with. Like, why is that not me? That's not fair. And yeah, there was a bit of that, but yeah, SANS were really helpful. Um, but what actually, this is important. What I will say is that my husband, we're not now together, but he, at the time, he just he went, literally. So it was the weekend that Princess Diana died, and he went on the Saturday to work. I'd had the miscarriage on the Wednesday, and he just disappeared, went, because he didn't know how to deal with it, and there was no support for him at all.
mm.
And I don't think he ever really dealt with it as such. So I think, from my perspective, in 25, 30 years ago, men were just pushed aside. Forget them, there was nothing for him. And so I don't think he ever really dealt with it properly.
And I don't know a huge amount I don't know as much about SANS in the stage. I know they're fantastic. Some close friends have had some incredible support from them this year, or well, last year now. Once you had sort of approached them or were working with them, was there a hint that they might want to help your husband, or was it was very much, well, we can help you?
Yeah, definitely it wasn't. And actually, maybe I didn't even give enough thought to that at the time. But I suppose you're so deep in your own kind of grief that, God, you got me questioning now. maybe I didn't give that enough thought either, but certainly from the charity point of view, I don't think there was any support for him. But then he didn't reach out for any, pushed it all away and just moved on. I'm going to work and that's what I'm doing.
I think that is improving, and I think there is a general movement for men to talk about anything
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
more,
I agree. I agree.
but particularly within baby loss. But I guess that's facilitated as well by a society where we say a lot in these conversations that it's not spoken about enough. Baby loss and miscarriage isn't spoken about enough,
No.
and still has a taboo status in society. How do you think that has changed in the last 30 years, or do you
100%. I mean,
see
I'm
people
just
talk about it
talking.
more now, or is it
Definitely.
very much the same films then?
Well, I'm not. I'm not in the thick of it as such now because I'm older and I have a mid-20s son. But I I definitely, just from the way he talks, I think that relationships are much more two-way, and you guys seem to talk about a lot more together. I, I think I've always thought this actually, that my age group are slightly stuck between the generation where the man went out to work and the woman stayed at home and looked after the kids, and my generation where we, as women, we wanted to go out to work and earn our own livings and be independent. So we were a little bit stuck between those two generations, and so we'd still got that thing of seeing our mothers doing all the caring and looking after and housework and blah blah,
Mm.
and us working. So I think we were a bit stuck, whereas you guys, I think, are a lot more open with each other and can talk a lot more to each other, even men to men, which I don't think that happened even when we had the miscarriage. I don't think that was so much of a thing. So I definitely think things have moved on. And when we first talked, that's what actually one of the things that really sparked me was like, this is amazing. Here's a guy talking about this stuff. This is incredible. And so, yeah, 100% things have moved on.
Yeah.
You're better at
So
it.
that's obviously, yeah, and the with that then the sort of societal conversation around baby loss. Have you seen a change in that, or do you still think that is as not just from a men talking about it perspective, just from a society talking about it perspective? Do you think it's still as suppressed as it was? Do you think that's improved, or what do you see
I
from that
definitely think it's
perspective?
improved, but I still think that people don't. It's obvious from our conversation at the very start. You talk about it, but then you move on. It could come up in conversation, and sometimes it does, and you go, "Oh, I lost some twins, and they were 20 weeks, and what are you having for lunch?"
Yeah.
It's still a bit that way for
Mm.
me, but I'm sure that it's probably different. I'm not in those so many of those conversations, so I perhaps can't give as full an answer as I'd like to that, but I
No, of
think it
course.
probably has moved on.
I think the thing that is still the blocker that I see is there is a lot of conversation happening. There's some fantastic groups that are doing other podcasts and starting charities and having lots of conversations about loss, which is fantastic. I don't think those conversations necessarily existed 15, 20, 25 years ago. The difficulty that I still see is that there's still, like we were talking about with from a pregnancy perspective, there's still people who have had a loss and are therefore seeking those conversations and seeking that advice, and people who haven't. And it's how do you successfully bridge that gap between, or how do you successfully make those people aware of the possibility of loss such that when it happens,
Such a
it's
mass.
somehow more manageable without telling everyone if you're going to be pregnant, you need to be shit scared for the entire time because this might happen or this might happen. It's such a fine balance, and that's the bit that I struggled to find personally. But yeah, I just wonder how we can increase awareness of the possibility for everyone, not just for people who have already been there, because by the time you've been there, it's already too late.
You're doing it, aren't you?
Well, that's what we're trying to. We're trying to. Whether it will work, I don't really know, but we'll
I think you're doing massive things. Massive things.
do our best. What do you think you learned at that time or since that that might help others who are going through something similar now?
Don't rush. Don't rush anything, because what is meant to be will be. Don't rush it.
And that's
I
from
think that's that, and I mean that from a, if you've been through a miscarriage or a loss, allow that to have happened to you and absorb it and understand it before, you sort of move on. Because I think that would be my biggest piece of advice. Just don't rush anything, because it will come to you.
I think that's really powerful, actually, because of the status, it's perhaps not the right word, but the status that miscarriage has within society. Again, if you lost a baby at 6 months and were a mess for a year, no one would think anything of it. Why should it be any different in your circumstances? And it shouldn't, and it isn't.
Mm.
You've lost 2 babies in the same way that you would have done if it had been a year later, and I think that's really valuable to just allow that space in the same way that you would. Has your outlook on what happened changed and evolved over time? But
Yeah.
do you think you look back on it differently now to how you did, even say like 20 years ago, like 10 years on?
Yeah.
Versus now?
Yeah, I do.
How's that sort of evolved?
I guess you think of all the what ifs. What if the twins had survived? Would I have had Charlie? And that's a weird one, but it's a really important one, because Charlie's everything. Has it changed?
How soon after the twins did you have Charlie?
So they were 97, end of August 97, and Charlie was born 11th of January 99. So
Okay.
yeah.
So I have that exact same thought about Poppy.
Yeah.
But ours is like a physical impossibility. Like if we had
Yeah.
if we'd have had the first baby, we like physically couldn't have got pregnant quickly enough, I think, because it happened in the end. I think Amy was pregnant 3 or 4 months after the miscarriage. But undoubtedly, even without that, it would be just the way that biology works and laws of chance work. It would be a different person. You might have had a girl, and would I give up Poppy for the first one? And how do I choose between those two? And it's such a...
You have all those thoughts, but I guess I am actually lucky in so much that we have got the twins' name on a grave, so I've got somewhere to go, and not that it's weird. Not that I ever knew them, but I have something physical. So that's quite nice. I think initially I certainly thought about the what ifs, what could have been, not so much now, because it's been a long time. And certainly, like you said, well, then I perhaps wouldn't have had what I've got. So I feel very lucky. I feel really blessed that I got Charlie. And also that actually, after all that trying to get pregnant, I fell pregnant naturally. after the twins. So again, that
Yeah.
was a blessing. So there's a lot of good. Whilst that makes me feel quite guilty and sad, there was some good.
I think that's the one thing. If I could sort of summarize the emotions and the conversations we have, it's that conflict. It's the, how can I be happy for my friend who's just had a
Yeah,
baby whilst also hating her a little
yeah.
bit? How can I be so happy with the children I now have and also so incredibly sad for the ones that I've lost? And how can those two things juxtapose and live
Side by
at the
side
same
almost.
time and
Yeah.
exist inside your head at the same time? But they do.
Yeah, they do.
Was there anything that surprised you about yourself during that time or since?
Oh, that's a big one. Um, just another something to make you a bit stronger because that was tough.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it was tough.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing all of that. I know it's not an easy topic to talk about, and sometimes perhaps when you get 30 years down the line, you think that you've put it to bed and you don't have to talk about it anymore. And then
No, it was
some,
really interesting how much emotion that brings up, actually. So yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
oh, sorry.
No, 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 in a good way.
Yeah, I think it's important to illustrate just how strong these emotions are and how they don't just disappear. No matter how many years it's been. We're going to talk about running now because this is a running challenge after all. We've got a real variety of running ability across our 39 weeks, as you can imagine. Some people are actual beginners, like starting from scratch, which is incredibly impressive from my perspective. But equally impressive are the accolades that Lucie has behind her with her running achievements. Where did running begin for you, Lucie? How did it become a part of your
I've always run for fitness. My main sport was horse riding for most of my life until I was about 42, when Charlie, my son, took up running, and oh, oh, he just had a fantastic coach at the time and a really good cohort of very good runners. He'd come home from school and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm doing this run," and I was like, "Oh." So we ended up doing Shropshire County Champs, which has just been last weekend, cross country. I just entered in some trackies and just ran round, and I think I came sixth in the women. And
yeah.
then Telford Athletics Club contacted me and said, "Oh, do you want to come down to the track on a Tuesday?" And I thought, "Oh, I might try
Mhm.
that." So it was that really
Yeah.
about, yeah, 12 years ago that started to run a bit more seriously. And then 5 years ago, um, I got a coach and started to take it a lot more seriously, did a few sort of age group champs and then ran a few marathons.
Yeah.
But really my place is on the track. That's where my love and my speed is, but always ran and always sort of kept fit one way or another.
If there was any need for any more differences between my running ability and yours, that is it's definitely one of them. My place is not on the track. I don't think I have a fast twitch fiber in my entire being, but I can set off and keep going. I think I've got a diesel engine rather than a petrol engine,
Yeah,
which hopefully will put me in good stead this year.
absolutely. You've got all the right tools there. Um,
Yeah.
Give me a
But you have
400
run
any day.
marathons.
Not 400
Yeah.
meters, not 26.2. Well, no, actually 1500, but yeah.
Yeah. But you have run marathons.
I did, I think I've done 4 or 5 now.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, actually, I'm gonna have to say goodbye to those because, yeah, this injury in my knee is not gonna hold up for the mileage, unfortunately. So I might be able to
But
run round them
is
slowly, but not like I will.
Yeah, of course. You have run marathons and you have run marathons very quickly. I think I'm going to tease you out of your modesty, but there's bit of a holy grail, certainly for male marathon runners, of a 3-hour marathon, which you ran a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Amsterdam 23?
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I don't need to worry about personally, but that's incredible. And actually, the day before or day after our run, you're competing in you tell me.
3,000 indoor championships in Cardiff, age group.
Nice. Where you are defending your title. Yeah.
I'm not sure,
So we have
sure I'll be able to, but I'll do my best.
do your best. So we have a proper runner in our midst for the Staffordshire leg, and that is probably for the best because the Staffordshire weekend is on or around our due date. So Amy will be wanting me to run that one as quickly as possible. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to speed up a huge amount, but if I've got some speedy company, then it'll perhaps chivvy me along a little bit too.
As you are aware, I can't unfortunately run the whole 26.2,
No.
but I'm going to jump on my bike. But I might have found you somebody who's pretty speedy to run along with you.
Yeah. So who have we got coming along? Hopefully.
Well, hopefully, I'm trying to get Omar Ahmed to come along, and he runs he jogs his jogs at about 6 30-minute miles.
Yeah. So he'll be walking.
Half marathon, 10Ks all over the country. He's won or come second in. So yeah,
I read a fantastic article about Omar in the week after you'd mentioned that he might be able to come along, in that he'd entered the Bristol 10K a couple of years ago and had gone the wrong way towards the finish.
Yeah.
And so he accidentally ended up running the half marathon.
He did.
Having set out to run a 10K.
Yeah.
And won the half.
He did.
But then got disqualified.
He's also paced a marathon and won it.
Wow. You're not supposed to do that, I guess, if you're quick enough. And where are we running?
We've set the route out to be all Staffordshire. So starting in a sort of a little villagey hamlet thing called Himley in Staffordshire, and we run down to a disused railway, and there's quite a long stretch on a nice disused railway, and we come off there and go a little bit into the back end of Staffordshire, but it's also sort of near the M4, so it's a big industrial estate, but quite nice to run around actually. And then a little loop back, and then basically back along the canal. So it's quite nice. It's quite nice. It's quite a sort of off-road route, but not. It's like running on tarmac, but off-road.
Yeah.
So
I'm hearing railways, and canals, which tell me flat. That's what I'm hearing. My brain is hearing.
I think you'll find there's not going to be any massive hills. No.
We've got plenty of hills to do this year, so if we can have
ours will be quite flat. Which is good.
There are definitely some hills to be found in that neck of the woods, if you want them. So if you've managed to avoid them, that'll be great.
Yes, I think we have. Canals and railways, yeah.
And Charlie going to come and run for a bit?
I think he's away, which is a real shame. Yeah. So,
but I know you've got lots of running pals.
Wolves and Bilston runners that are all hopefully going to jump in on the train, so that if I do have a puncture on my bike, at least you've got some company.
Perfect.
But I think my intention is to try and run up to 10. That's the most I've done since the injury. So
yeah. And I'll add that Lucie committed to running when I think you'd had about 6 weeks off, and the furthest you'd been was about 2 miles. So you said at the time, I'll do as much as I can, but I don't know how much that's going to be. But to be in that position and to commit to running any sort of distance at all was fantastic. So
no, absolutely. I wish I could do the whole thing, but I know my knee won't stand up to it. So
I wish I could only do 10 miles.
Yeah, I bet you do. Actually, you could have the bike. We're good.
Yeah, perfect. No one will know. We'll swap watches. But now I know you've got a fantastic running community with your club, so I'm sure we'll have plenty of company on the day.
Yeah, we'll definitely have company. Nice
to be close to home for me.
Yeah.
And see some familiar faces and familiar places perhaps. So yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Good.
But thank you again very much for talking to us today and for your enthusiasm for the challenge as a whole. And we'll look forward to running with you.
Brilliant. I'm very much looking
Thank you very
forward
much.
to it. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lucie. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Olly.